This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be.
You are welcome to be a part of our community. And we're so glad that you're here today for this time of worship. Russ is our co-host for today, Russ C on the list. So if you need help with something while we're worshiping, let him know. You can send him a direct message in the chat options. And he can help you out, hopefully. And we're going to use the chat to answer some questions and get some sharing in, even though we're virtual. It's been really fun to be able to read through that. So our sharing for every week, we've been sharing the same things. Where you're from, and how has your week been on a scale from 1 to 10? How has your week been? Sorry, I'm having some sharing issues today. Here we go. I thought so anyway. There we go. So yes, tell us in the chat, how has your week been on a scale from 1 to 10? And tell us where you're joining us from. And as we do that, as we sort of check in, you can feel free to explain why you're picking the number, or you can just tell us what the number is, and no need to explain any more than that. While we're also checking in, we want to make sure that you are connected as much as you want to be. So Russ is going to share a link to sign up for our weekly email list. So we tried every Wednesday. I usually try to send out an email just with the information about what we're going to be doing this week. What's our topic? What songs, readings, and it has the Zoom link, and it's a good reminder, a place to go back to when you need it. And so feel free to sign up on that form that Russ just shared. We had a really fun time today with Binghamton Food Rescue reps and a rep from Sky Lake, Eric, who met us at the BU Nature Preserve for our weekly Sunday saunter. So we meet while we're doing Zoom worship for January and February. We need our outdoor time still. So we're meeting earlier in the day at a location that's a little easier to get to than our normal Sky Lake. So you can feel free to join us at this beautiful gazebo right by parking lot M. And today we got the chance to give out $500 to Binghamton Food Rescue and to Sky Lake, which was really exciting. And we were able to do that because of the amazing support we get from you all. So you can continue to support us in this coming year. We've switched to a different online giving platform. So if you were signed up with a Tindley, you got to switch over to Fundraise, which is on our website, and Russ is going to share that link. You can give one time or sign up so it just automatically comes out. We don't care how much or how often. It's just awesome to know that there are people who want to support our work. And we've committed again this year to give 10% of everything we raise to organizations doing awesome justice work in the Southern Tier, like Binghamton Food Rescue and Sky Lake. So we're going to be choosing a new organization or two for 2022. If you have suggestions, please let us know. And definitely let us know. We're looking to hear more from everybody who's been a part of our worship circles, just about worship in general and about other ways we can support you and be your community in the wilds of life. So we're going to be sending out a survey tomorrow to anyone who's attended worship like more than once, a couple of times, just to get feedback. We strive to be a communal organization, which is not always easy to figure out what that looks like in a world that is run by the patriarchy. So we're trying, and we want to hear from people. So you'll be getting an email with a Google form link to fill out this in the next couple of weeks to help us and guide us as we make plans for the next 6 months after celebrating our first 6 months. So I think that's the main stuff that's going on. You got the email link, you got the donate link. Everybody is sharing. I get to go back and read through it later. And we get to move forward into this time and space of worship. So I am going to read for you. Our special guest today is Carmela Buono, and she is going to be talking about Indigenous wisdom. And so she said whenever she shares about this research, she likes to share a land acknowledgement at the beginning. So these are her words that I offered to read. The research I conduct for my PhD is on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Susquehannock, Lenni Lenape, and Munsee Lenape. I grew up on Lenni Lenape land. I seek to acknowledge the continued presence of the Lenape people in their homeland and affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief, Tamanend, that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants of this land. as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. I acknowledge Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of this land that I am so very privileged to study, and I honor the lasting relationship between these nations and the land. This land that Indigenous communities were forcibly removed from, though some remain among the continuing regional tribal communities. I offer this land acknowledgement to affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences connected with these regions, and I advocate for increased Indigenous recognition within the scientific and research community. Thank you for those beautiful words, Carmela. And now, along similar lines, we are also recognizing and celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday as the national holiday is tomorrow. So Kristen has this awesome time of music for us.
We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Though I join hands so often with students and others behind jail bars singing it, we shall overcome. Sometimes we've had tears in our eyes when we joined together to sing it, but we still decided to sing it. We shall overcome. No, before this victory's won, some will have to get thrown in jail some more, but we shall overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome
Bring new light into the dark chambers of pessimism, and we will be able to rise from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope. And this will be a great America. We will be the participants in making it so. And so as I leave you this evening, I say, walk together, children. Don't you get weary.
Thanks, Kristen. Now we're going to share our wisdom reading. And again, Carmela is going to be talking to us about this research paper written by Jensen and others called Contributions of Indigenous Knowledge to Ecological and Evolutionary Understanding. And so this is a quote that she felt was really good for us to hear from this paper. Indigenous knowledge is distinct from science, local knowledge, and citizen science in that it includes not only direct observation and interaction with plants, animals, and ecosystems, but also a broad spectrum of cultural and spiritual knowledges and values that underpin human-environment relationships. Specifically, conservation programs are shifting away from exclusionary conservation, principally aimed at limiting human access to specific areas, toward more participatory, community-based conservation, which centers local peoples in the conservation process. Such biocultural approaches enhance long-term investment in conservation and management programs by preserving the linkages between indigenous peoples and the ecosystems on which their cultures and societies depend. These connections reinforce indigenous stewardship principles and the beliefs of responsibility for upholding human services for ecosystems deeply embedded in customary law and teachings. And we now have an awesome video from Rich for our nature connection time.
Hi, my name is Rich Hanlon. I'm your Wild Neighbors Nature Connection Nature Guide, and today I welcome you to the ancestral lands of the Susquehannock Native American tribe along the banks of the Chemung River in Athens, Pennsylvania. Today, I wonder if we can find ourselves in the gift, the adversity, and the reciprocity of wild nature by taking a look into the life of the hackberry tree. Yes, this is a beautiful hackberry tree standing right next to me here along the river's banks. Let's take a closer look at this amazing bark. Every time I happen upon a hackberry tree in the woods, I feel like it's a gift to my sensory experience. Just look at this bark, it's amazing. It feels corky to the touch, and it has these raised ridges that makes me think of a topographic map of something like the Appalachian Mountains with those folded ridges. Do you see it? And not only is the hackberry tree a gift to me and my sensory experience when I'm walking through the woods, the hackberry tree presents gifts to nature's community. Let's take a look at a couple. This is a hackberry tree. That's a hackberry tree. That's a hackberry tree. There's hackberry trees all along the bank of the river right here. And one of the gifts that these hackberry trees are gifting to this ecosystem is that they are holding the precious soil and the nutrients in the soil in place. The roots structures are helping to keep the forces of the river from eroding the precious soil on these banks. Let's take a look into the canopy of the hackberry tree to get a look at one of the greatest gifts that hackberry trees gift to the wildlife of the forest during the wintertime. Look and see if you can see all those tiny circular dark spots at the outer branches of the hackberry tree there. Those are hackberry berries. Hackberry berries are a very good source of energy for birds like robins and cedar waxwings in the wintertime, and during their migration back north in late winter, early spring, birds like yellow-rumped warblers will even pick at hackberries. And the hackberries, they're not only edible to the wildlife, they're also edible to you and me. It's hard to reach them, and thankfully, there's a little end of a branch that fell down and landed in a branch of this bush here. And just to show you how good they are, I'm going to eat this one. They have kind of a yellowish interior. It tastes kind of reminiscent of a persimmon. It's small and sweet. Very good. And it's kind of got a big seed for a little berry. Animals like raccoons and squirrels and others are also benefiting from the gift of hackberries presented by this hackberry tree. Take a look down at the forest floor here. Right here is a pile of hackberries, and it looks like it may be in a pile of raccoon poop. Let's talk adversity. Can you think of a time when someone gifted you with something that you needed to help you get through a season of adversity? Or can you think of a time when you were able to gift someone else with something that they needed to get through a season of adversity for them? There's adversity in the life of the hackberry tree and in the lives of the wildlife who depend upon its gifts. Adversity for a hackberry tree looks like producing thousands or even millions of hackberries for every one or few that lands in the right spot with the right resources to germinate into the next generation of hackberry trees that line the river's banks. Adversity for the wildlife that depends upon this amazing tree has to do with survival, surviving the harsh winter months in the northeastern United States. And you have birds like robins, American robins and cedar waxwings. Well, sometimes they'll gather in flocks during the winter, and sometimes even mixed flocks where you have both robins and waxwings together. You know, when you're dealing with a time of adversity, it helps to have a place of belonging and a community that you can count on, and that's the way the birds do it. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw that there's thousands of little hackberries in these branches. I would not be surprised if it's over the course of 1 or 2 days that eventually, when times are tough, a big flock of robins or waxwings or some other bird species will come and eat all the berries off of that tree in a few days. What a gift that must be. I wonder if birds can feel a joy. I feel like that would be a cause for celebration if you happen upon a hackberry tree like this in the dead of winter. So I only hope that I'm here to witness when that happens. Let's talk reciprocity. And it's simple, really. The hackberry trees help to hold the soil in place along the river's banks. And the soil gifts the hackberry trees with the nutrients that they need to survive and thrive. And these hackberry trees are producing berries. Those berries will help wildlife like robins and cedar waxwings and others to get the energy that they need to survive the winter. And the birds, in turn, will help to scatter the seeds of the hackberry trees, hopefully in a few very nutrient-rich places. Thanks for joining me for this brief look into the life of the hackberry tree. And I want to recognize that there are as many ways to find ourselves in the gift, in the adversity, and in the reciprocity of wild nature as there are neighbors in the forest. So get out this week in your own unique way. Find yourself in the gift, the adversity, and the reciprocity of wild nature. Maybe it'll be so profound that it'll make you want to go, GAR! Get it? G-A-R, gift, adversity, reciprocity. Sticks with me anyway. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Hi, my name is Rich Hanlon. For this segment...
That's another one. All right. Thank you, Rich.
You're welcome.
Feel free, Rich, to put your Wild Neighbors link in the chat so people can follow your YouTube and Facebook.
I'll put the link for Wild Neighbors Nature Connection in the chat box. That way you guys can take a look at that later if you'd like. Thanks.
Yeah, we don't want to miss any of that content. So at this point, I am going to introduce our special guest. If she's ready, Carmela Buono is...
I'm ready.
Yeah. All right. So you feel free to share your screen. I'm gonna spotlight you for the moment and you can take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Can someone give me a thumbs up that you're seeing the slideshow and not the power? Thank you, Russ. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Carmela Buono. I am here to talk about this paper that I recently kind of talked about in my graduate program and was encouraged that it might be something really interesting to talk about here with this group. First, before I get into that, I wanted to just share a little bit about myself. So I'm a PhD candidate at Binghamton University. PhD candidate is just a fancy way of saying I finished all of my exams and now I'm just in the throes of writing the dissertation. So If you ever wonder the difference between candidate and student, that's just the jargon, the lingo. What do I do? Well, so I consider myself a community ecologist. That's someone who might not focus particularly on a specific organism or specific system or environment, but rather holistically. I look at both plants and animals, how they interact in that whole system. And my broad interests are just how humans and how we disturb our environments, how that impacts the functions of our environment. So things like forest acting as filtration systems. Rich brought up a great point for trees, how they help with a service of keeping erosion down. I'm interested in all those things. And then simply the last thing is I'm just a nature enthusiast. I really enjoyed that video just now about the hackberry. It was great. And I want to educate folks as much as I can on science and nature around them. And I picked these two pictures because I think this shows the range of a PhD student in ecology. I can present and dress up if I need to, but then I'll be in thickets of rose bush when it comes the time. So that's the range of what I do day to day. Okay, so a lot of my work, this is not what I'm going to be talking about today, but I always like to share a little bit about what I do to the people I talk to. So I spend hours and hours studying these little lovely ladies. So this is a worker ant, a general woodland species that you can find anywhere in the Northeast. And a lot of, I think, folks that are native to this region don't realize that some of the ants that are native to this region do a really neat thing, and they spread seeds. They are dispersers. So Rich just talked about birds dispersing seeds. Well, these ants themselves are dispersers, which is so neat. And I wanted to share a little video with you all too. So my research is I study how well these ants disperse seeds. So here's a worker. I put out seeds, and one came across my petri dish, and she's going to pick it up and go carry it across back to her nest, back to feed her the queen's larva and things. So why did I tease all that? I just think more people in this region need to know that we are a very unique and cool hotspot for this interaction. Ants that move seeds only occurs in 4 places across the globe. I know some of you are like, how is this possible? I grew up in New Jersey and did not know this existed until graduate school. So I hope after today you can go out and tell folks like, hey, you want to know a cool thing that's unique to this region? Only other places that this happens is parts of Europe, South Africa, and Australia. So it's kind of cool, something the West Coast doesn't have on us, just to put it out there. Okay, enough of that about what I do. And if anyone wants to talk about that afterwards, I'd be more than happy to. Why am I here today? Well, I wanted to share a little bit about the wisdom and knowledge that comes from Indigenous groups and why that knowledge is so critical and important to the study of ecology. And, as an ecologist myself, I think it's a critical thing to know. So 3 things I want to take away from this talk today is, well, what is Indigenous knowledge? Hope some of you will learn that today. What are some examples of Indigenous knowledge in ecological research? And finally, what does the future hold for Indigenous knowledge and ecological research? So this paper that was written by Jensen and folks delves into these 3 points. Firstly, I just want to define Indigenous knowledge. So that's the understandings, skills, philosophies that are developed by societies with long histories of interaction with their natural surroundings. We might consider this a lot of like Indigenous groups, Native groups. In my land acknowledgement, I listed all of the Native nations who traditionally inhabited the land that I do my research on. The knowledge that they gain from just all that time, all that interaction with the land that they depend on, they live on. Think about it, if your livelihood depended on the plants and animals around you, you would have an immense amount of knowledge just built up over time through tradition and culture about that region. On the other side, we have Western science. So what I am traditionally being trained to do right now. So you might recall the scientific method that we all learned about, right? At some point in our science classes in school. That's what we're talking about here. The rigorous sort of very systematic way that we learn about the world around us. That's defined as Western science. And so today, I know this is a little corny, but I want to make the case that though these things are defined differently, they share something in the middle, which is that they're both in the pursuit of knowledge or just have that important ecological knowledge that someone like myself, an ecologist, really kind of needs. So this is a lot going on here. You do not need to read all of this, but this is straight from the paper. And I think one of the best takeaways, let me see, I like to use a nice little pointer. Yes. The paper kind of shows what are the differences and commonalities between Indigenous knowledge and Western science. And I really like at the bottom here where it talks about Indigenous knowledge, think about more of a qualitative understanding of nature and its surroundings. There's no experiments going on, there's no monitoring of temperature over time, but it's just this inherent qualitative experience and that knowledge being gained. Whereas Western traditional science, kind of like what I said, we've got things like experiments, monitoring, and so that's how knowledge is gained there. But then really in the middle, all that is shared between these two modes of knowledge is that we're there to understand the components of our ecosystems and how they interact with one another, and really trying to understand environmental conditions and the organisms that are in nature. Also, a really neat thing that this paper points out is, well, why is this relevant? Well, research involving incorporating Indigenous knowledge is a growing field. So at the top here, we have over time, the amount of research that includes Indigenous knowledge is really skyrocketing, which is really exciting. I think this is just through increased acknowledgement and knowledge and collaboration that's going on. And the really cool thing, the second part of the figure, when you break down all the research that includes Indigenous knowledge, the bulk of it really is in ecological, environmental sciences, things like plant sciences, ecology, conservation. But it makes sense because we both are tied to understanding the natural world. And so I think that wasn't surprising when I saw it, but it's just nice, you know, to see the data kind of relates to your theory. So now is my favorite part of this talk. I'm going to share with all of you some examples of how Indigenous knowledge helped out ecologists. And some of these examples are just so humbling and so interesting to me. So first is this example where Indigenous groups asserted their rights to the land to help conservation efforts. So this was in British Columbia. Locally, folks, so Indigenous and non-Indigenous, noticed that this regional crab was starting to not only decline in number, but the average size of the crabs were getting smaller. And this is usually a sign of overfishing, overharvesting. So the First Nations in the region, actually using their established law and right to the land, started to require certain fishery spots to close. So here in this map, we've got any of these blue markers are open fishery spots still, and then the red ones were forcibly closed due to the Indigenous nations acting upon their rights to the land. And the really cool outcome there is over time, actually, they noticed the sites that were closed by these First Nation groups, the catch rate and size of the male crabs that they caught over time increased. So this is a beautiful example of these nations had almost like a pulse on what was happening already before the Canadian government, and they were able to act upon it and save and help preserve and conserve these crabs, which is kind of, I think, just a great example that, you know, if anything else could be an example of why we need to give rights and policy to help Indigenous nations, this is a prime example. Another really cool example, again in British Columbia, there was a group trying to study woodland caribou. And so to do this, the Western traditional scientists, I shouldn't say traditional because that looks, Western scientists would go out and survey what they could quantitatively. So they measured habitat, vegetation, what's the temperature, what's the rain. They put it all together in a model, and they wanted to predict where we could find woodland caribou. On the other side, Indigenous scientists took what they know about caribou, and they kind of compared their models side by side. And so on the left here, what we have is the Western scientists model, so that's A and B, Because there's more red, that's where they assumed, based off the model, where they would find this caribou. Interestingly, though, on the right side, what I've outlined in the box, the indigenous knowledge models had a lot less red. And their models were different because the indigenous scientists knew that caribou like something that no one knew. They don't like it when there's been burning of the land. There's a huge component missing from this model. And so if we had used the models on the left that had overestimated where we could find the caribou, a scientific community might think like, oh, the caribou have plenty of habitat. They're fine. We don't need to worry about them. But actually using that indigenous knowledge of, oh, we've learned, passed down through generations, caribou don't like burnt land. Something as simple as that. They were able to understand, like, actually, there might be less habitat that the caribou can use than we think. There might be a problem here. Now, by far, my favorite. I probably said the past two are my favorite. No, this is my favorite example. So in Northern Australia, the Aboriginal tribes there, it is well known in their culture, through their traditions, this figure of a firehawk. They have a firehawk dance. They have art of firehawks. And for the longest time, this was just accepted as like, oh, that's lore. That's part of their indigenous culture and kind of mythical. Oh no, folks, oh no. Through the work of indigenous fire rangers paired with scientists, they were able to capture actually that this indigenous piece of culture was not just some lore, but it was an actual observation where hawks, native hawks to the area, if there's a wildfire, they will pick up a little branch, a little fire on it, and move it to a non-fire area to help scare rodents and help them feed and hunt. And this never would have been captured if it weren't for the knowledge that these indigenous rangers offered. And on top of that, they were able to then inform other fire rangers that like, oh, we need to be careful. If there are hawks near a fire, they might spread that fire. So it also helped management practices. And so again, something that non-indigenous folks might have been like, ah, yeah, that's lore, mythical firehawks. No, based.
I think you might need to switch to the mic on your computer. Your headphones might have cut out. We can't hear you right now.
Am I back?
You're back. There you go.
There, great. Okay. My headphones like to do this fun thing where it puts me on the tip of my toes and scare me. I'm back. So yes, the firehawk, amazing example. And last example, because I know I'm probably going long. There was a conservation group in Egypt that wanted to study these Egyptian tortoises. The problem was they did not have enough funding to buy all of the very expensive radio trackers to put on tortoises to understand where they go. So what they did instead, they bought a few trackers and then they used local guides that understood where the tortoises go and could actually follow the tortoises. And they found that the data identical, that humans, indigenous individuals nearby would actually be better to opt in using them to follow the tortoises. And on top of that, think about it, you're helping the local economy. You can help those folks have a job and provide some insight on an organism that they care about. And when you have a person tracking a tortoise, you learn a lot more about that tortoise. What's it eating? Is it healthy? What's it interacting with? The radio collar just pings and tells you where it's going. So this was just a great bridge of, maybe the fancy gadget sounds cool, but actually in science, maybe we need to consider the people that can help us out locally. So in summation, I just wanted to show that we might have certain challenges in Western science, things like if the location is too remote or equipment is too expensive. Well, indigenous knowledge offers, well, there's local people that know those species and have those tracking skills. If we have issues with long-term, we need long-term data to understand things over time. Well, indigenous peoples have long-term cultural traditions passed down over time, so they have that knowledge. And then finally, Western science, is usually shaped a lot by funding systems, and sometimes those interests might shift, or there might just not be enough funding. But indigenous knowledge is constantly driven by, well, this is our livelihoods. We're not determined by funding sources. This is our culture. We are embedded in this. And so I hope what you learned today was that indigenous knowledge is made up of place-based knowledge. This is an increasing part of Western science and a growing field. Indigenous knowledge has already made so many contributions for helping better understand ecology, and I'm excited to see what more there is out there. And really, just in the future, science, the way forward is incorporating and collaborating with Indigenous nations, because there's a wealth of knowledge I think that would benefit everyone. And really quick, what can all of you do? So I really love, there's this website called Native Land. I think it's .ca, the little bar is covering it, so I hope it's there, but I can link it after. And you can learn about your local region. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Another thing is encouraging proper acknowledgement in your local communities. So in the beginning, I had shared a land acknowledgement that I try to share whenever I talk about my research. But whether it's, my local community, which is Binghamton University, through the movement of students kind of encouraging the university put together a land acknowledgement, really kind of talking about the history of Indigenous groups in the region. And so that's a thing that I think we can do to advocate just for the knowledge of, like, yes, Indigenous groups were here, they are here, they offer a great resource to us all, and it's our due diligence to acknowledge them. Whew, sorry, I don't know if that was too long, but that is everything that I have for today. If you'd like to talk more about any of this, and also ants, if you're interested in ants, this is my contact information. Be more than happy to interact with anyone. And yeah. I'm gonna stop.
Thank you so much. So fun and informative.
Thank you, Cam.
And I love the, is that called a ghost flower, the last?
Oh yes, my favorite.
Yeah, we have those at Sky Lake where we normally meet.
Yes, one of my favorite flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I am just so thankful for all of our amazing guest speakers this month. And next week we have another BU biology student. Cam will be presenting a biologist's perspective of the divine, which is going to be really cool. So I hope you can join us again next week. We, of course, will be sharing the recording online, which is always nice to come back to if you need a time of meditation at some point, which is what we are about to do now. And I'm excited that Cheryl is here to lead us in meditation this week. So feel free to remain muted, everybody except for Cheryl. I'm going to just share my screen of a beautiful image of Sky Lake. But you are welcome to follow Cheryl's instructions of closing your eyes or not. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Corey. Before I start, I want to make sure my volume is okay. Can someone? Okay, great. Then I invite you to either close your eyes, lower your gaze, look at this photo, look out your window, whatever you feel moved to do. That would help you and settle into a more meditative stance. I invite you to feel your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair. Feel yourself grounded to the earth, even if you're in a second floor room as I am. Notice that gravity is holding us all to the earth with no effort of our own. We are supported. We are supported in so many ways by nature. the very air we breathe, all the food we have, everything we have is gift in the end. I invite you to bring your attention to your breath and just notice your breath for perhaps the first time today. Our bodies breathe for us all day long, and there is oxygen in the air available for us all day long without our needing to pay attention. But for this one moment, or for the next few moments, I invite you to pay attention. Notice where you're most aware of your breath. It may be at your nostrils, in your throat, in your chest, in your belly. And then notice that you are in your body. Draw your attention more fully into your own body, your own self for this bit of time. You might imagine that you've put out energy cords to other people, other places during the day, and reel them in like a vacuum cleaner cord or a fishing rod. Back into yourself for this bit of time to recharge. And scan your body for any places of tension. And just gently invite them to release as much as they're able to right now. And then any remaining tension, just allow it to be. Starting at your top of your head, your scalp, your forehead, the space between your eyes, your jaw, your throat and neck. Release any tension you might be holding in your shoulders and down through your arms. And bringing your attention back up through your arms, release any tension you might be holding in your torso, front, back, sides, inside or out. Release any tension you may be holding in your hips. Notice if your tailbone is curled and let it uncurl if it is. Release any tension in your legs, your upper legs, your knees, your lower legs, your feet and toes. And then bring your attention back up into the center of you. Perhaps your heart region, perhaps your belly, whatever is feeling like the center right now. And just breathe into that center of yourself. Allow yourself to be grounded and centered, held by the earth, held by the divine. Notice the strength of your center. And if it feels like it's not that strong, notice the strength that is there and let it expand. And you might stay here just being in the center of you, grounded and centered. Or if there's something that would aid you in living from your center in the coming week, open your hands and allow yourself to receive that from the divine, from the earth. It might be strength, beauty, clarity, patience, boldness, wisdom. Whatever it is, know that it is available to you. And know that in the interconnectedness of this community, we are all holding it for each other. And allow yourself to feel that interconnectedness. And the ways that we can contribute to and nourish each other, even from a distance, even without speaking. And as we begin to conclude this meditation, I invite you to express gratitude for anything you might have received. And I also invite you to anchor anything you might have received into your body, perhaps by placing your hand on your center, perhaps by placing your palms together, whatever gesture might feel natural to you and might serve as a reminder and an anchor in the coming week. And then as you're ready, I invite you to take a deeper, fuller breath and once again feel your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair, and taking your time, gently opening your eyes and returning to the circle on the Zoom screen.
Thank you, Cheryl. We share this moment of Thanksgiving together, though there are so many challenging things going on in the world, so many concerning news stories to read and hear about. We pause to give thanks as a way of proclaiming that there are still good things in life and things for which we are grateful. And I think it's also a really good reminder to focus our energy and our time into cultivating more of the things that inspire gratitude in us. So feel free to share in the chat what you're feeling particularly grateful for today or this week. Because I think that when there are times that we feel helpless or hopeless, seeing others' expressions of gratitude helps to remind us of the things in our life that we can be grateful for as well. So share those. It's great to see so many wonderful things in the chat. And I want to share that I am so grateful for all the people who come together to make this time possible, for everybody who's stepped into a role to serve, to help. For all of our guest speakers, it's not a small, simple thing to do. So thank you to everybody who contributes to this time. And thank you all for being a part of it too. It's so great to see your faces, even if on a screen. And I know we're not together physically, but I do truly feel that everybody still brings their energy and presence to our gatherings, and that each week it's, just slightly different depending on who's there. So thank you for bringing all that you are to this time. We also take a time to set an intention for ourselves. So Cheryl's meditation perfectly primed us for this. We gave thanks and we receive. What is it that we want for our week ahead? Is there a word or a phrase that we can set as an intention? Think about it. Feel free to share if you'd like. Again, it's inspirational for the rest of us as we think about how we want to live for the next 7 days. Gratitude, yeah. Peace and calm. Yes, it feels like the right season just to be for a little bit and to be at peace. And it was a nice reminder to get outside today for our saunter, to experience the restfulness of nature. Even though we were hiking, we were taking a good walk to stay warm mostly. We were reminded of the stillness of the ice that was everywhere, and the stillness of the flowing streams, and the sap in the trees is stilled. And we found a little frozen worm who was stilled in its movement, but it's a good reminder. Yeah. Oh yeah, reciprocity, great one from Rich. Well, however you live this week, I hope that you will live intentionally, knowing that how you live affects the world around us and the people around you. And I'll invite you to share in our blessing. You can receive it and participate in it if you would like. Oh, my hands might disappear in my background, but you can follow the others along if you don't know it. And feel free to stay for a few minutes after our closing song. If you want to catch up and talk with folks, we'll all unmute and we can share then. But if you're not able to stay, thank you so much for being with us. And we hope that you felt a connection to our community and to the divine, and we hope you'll join us again next week. So may you receive this blessing. Deep peace of running wave to you. Deep peace of flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the source of peace be with you all.
All right, it's time for our last song for worship today. Again, if you have an instrument hanging around, whether that's a shaker, your knees, or an instrument that you like to play in the key of C, feel free to join us for our final song, Peace, Salaam, Shalom.